She showed kindness to a customer and lost her job because of it. Yet the following day, she returned as the boss. Megan had never sought trouble. She wasn't the type to stir the pot or initiate conflicts. She believed in being dependable, accomplishing her duties, and treating people well. These values were rooted in her upbringing, basic principles of hard work, respect for others, and lying low during chaotic times. However, sometimes, doing the right thing led to repercussions, and she was about to discover that the hard way. For nearly 3 years, Lancaster Grill had become like a second home to her. It wasn't extravagant, just a neighborhood diner situated on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, nestled between a laundromat and a gas station. It was the kind of diner where truck drivers stopped for coffee, families gathered for Sunday brunch, and the waitstaff learned your order before they learned your name. Megan realized it was the kind of job that could easily be taken for granted. The hours were lengthy, the pay was not impressive, and management hardly cared. Still, she persevered. Bills needed to be paid, and her rent for her one-bedroom apartment was already exorbitantly high. Plus, her younger brother, Evan, was a college sophomore, unaware that she was helping to cover his groceries and textbooks when their mother couldn't afford it. She never mentioned it, simply sending him a little extra money when possible. That's why she accepted extra shifts and tolerated customers who barely acknowledged her and coworkers who treated kindness like a flaw. She'd witnessed behavior there that made her stomach churn. How Beth, a senior waitress, disregarded certain customers while she flirted and laughed with others. How Jason, a newer server, would avoid some tables entirely. How the entire atmosphere of the restaurant shifted depending on who entered. It wasn't merely about money. A well-dressed businessman would receive smiles and conversation, while a working-class customer in a paint-stained uniform got quick service. If a patron seemed unlikely to tip, some staff wouldn't even try to serve them. Megan despised this, but had learned that calling it out wasn't an option. Not after a few months ago, when she casually remarked about a table waiting too long while Beth was occupied by the counter. Scrolling on her phone, Beth looked straight at her and said, "You don't get paid extra for being a saint." Megan, that was the reality. You either went along with it, or you learned to suppress your thoughts. Megan had opted for the latter until that night, after which everything changed. The dinner rush had passed, and it was a slow Wednesday evening, which Megan surprisingly didn't mind. Fewer customers meant fewer complaints, fewer spills, and fewer forced smiles from her co-workers, who only showed their charm when it benefited them. As she stood at the counter restocking sugar dispensers, the bell above the door chimed, announcing the entrance of an older black man. His attire was clean yet slightly worn, not flashy. Just a simple button-up and slacks. He carried himself with quiet assurance, but there was a hint of hesitation as he briefly scanned the room before stepping further inside. Megan recognized that hesitation. She had seen it before, especially in customers who already knew what kind of welcome awaited them, whether friendly or cold. And sure enough, the immediate reaction was undeniable. Beth, leaning against the counter, didn't even glance up from her phone, while Jason, who had been joking with another server at the drink station, caught sight of the man for a brief moment before returning to his conversation. No greeting, no welcome to Lancaster Grill, just silence. Megan felt the heaviness of it, thick and uncomfortable. This wasn't just coincidental. Her co-workers had made a conscious choice. For a fleeting moment, she thought about keeping her head down and remaining uninvolved. It would certainly be easier, as it always was. But then she looked at the man again, who stood there waiting as if giving them a chance to prove him wrong. Just this once. So, Megan made a decision of her own. She wiped her hands on a napkin, grabbed a menu, and walked right over. "Good evening, sir," she greeted him, her tone warm yet casual. "Dining alone tonight." He met her gaze, and something in his expression softened. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice steady. Megan smiled and gestured towards an open booth by the window. Follow me. Are you all right with a booth? Perfectly fine, he answered as he settled into it. She handed him a menu and retrieved a pen from behind her ear. Can I get you started with something to drink? Coffee, he said. Black. Coming right up, Megan replied, moving swiftly to grab a fresh pot and pour his cup herself. She could sense Beth's gaze upon her. Felt Jason watching too, but she didn't turn around. As she placed the coffee in front of him, he glanced around the restaurant and then back to her. You the only one working tonight? He asked, his voice low enough for just her to hear. Megan understood his concern. She briefly looked at the others, where Beth was now whispering to Jason, both barely concealing their smirks. It feels like it sometimes, she said, earning a chuckle from him. He opened the menu and scanned the offerings. What's good here? Megan tilted her head in thought. Depends on what you feel like. If you're in the mood for something hearty, the pot roast is freshly made. But if you want my personal favorite, the grilled salmon is the way to go. He raised an eyebrow. Is that so? She nodded. I promise you won't regret it. He gave a small but genuine smile. Salmon it is. Megan noted it down. Great choice. As she made her way back to the kitchen, she overheard Beth mumble, just loud enough to be heard. She's wasting her time. Megan bit her jaw but continued walking. By the time she put in the order and returned with the fresh coffee refill, she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. It was subtle, but it was there. The way Beth's gaze narrowed, Jason occasionally glancing towards the booth as though anticipating Megan's slip-up or a misstep in her conduct. Even Tom, the manager, peeked out from his office, scanning the restaurant before withdrawing again. Megan felt a sinking dread. She had inadvertently placed a target on her own back, but she couldn't grasp just how severe it was until the next morning. Megan hardly slept, a nagging feeling churning in her stomach about Beth's murmured comments, Jason's smirks, and Tom's fleeting glance from his office. She tried to rationalize the unease, telling herself she was overthinking, that she did nothing wrong. After all, she fulfilled her duties as a waitress by serving customers. So why did her stomach twist as she pulled into the Lancaster Grill parking lot the next morning? The air was crisp, the sun just starting to rise over the buildings as she retrieved her apron from the passenger seat and draped it over her shoulder. A couple of cars were already in the lot, including Tom's. Megan stepped inside, anticipating the usual sight of Beth and Jason chatting, the kitchen crew preparing for the morning rush, and the radio playing softly in the background. But something felt amiss. Beth wasn't leaning against the counter as per usual, and Jason wasn't brewing coffee or joking with the line cooks. Instead, both were watching her, Beth with a sly smile and Jason with his arms crossed, while neither uttered a word. Megan's grip on her apron intensified. Then she heard the door creaking open. Tom stood in his office doorway, regarding her like he had been waiting for her arrival. Megan, he stated flatly, come with me. A cold pit settled in her stomach. Tom didn't answer. It was as if he turned and walked back into his office, without a word. Megan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Beth and Jason's gaze on her as she followed Tom to the back, taking a deep breath and straightening her shoulders. She stepped inside. The office felt tight, cluttered with paperwork and old coffee stains. A file lay open on Tom's desk, but he didn't focus on it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, allowed a slow breath, and said, "We're letting you go." Those words felt like a slap. Megan blinked, her mind racing to make sense of what she had just heard. Tom's demeanor remained unchanged. It's not working out. Her heart raced. Not working out. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped her lips. I've been here nearly 3 years, never missed a shift. Never late. Tom exhaled through his nose, as if fatigued by the discussion. It's a decision we've made. Megan knew what that implied, the tightening in her throat. This is because of last night, isn't it? Tom's silence confirmed her fears. She could feel heat rising to her face. So, I'm getting fired for doing my job. Tom's fingers began to tap against the desk. You can collect your final paycheck next week. That was all, no warning. No explanation, just over. Megan clenched her fists. Aware arguing was futile. She untied her apron and placed it on the chair. As she turned to leave, she hesitated at the door, forcing herself to glance back at Tom. You know this isn't right, she voiced steadily. Tom didn't even flinch, shaking her head. She exited. When she returned to the dining area, Beth still stood near the counter, a knowing smirk twisting her face. Jason pretended to clean a table, though he couldn't suppress the look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had anticipated this moment. Megan felt her cheeks burn. This wasn't embarrassment but anger. She wanted to confront them, to create a scene demanding to know how they could be so callous. But she held back, refusing to give them that satisfaction. She lifted her chin high and walked past them silently, pushing through the doors into the chilly morning air. For the first time in 3 years, she was without a job, a paycheck, or a backup plan. She slipped into her car, slamming the door and gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. How would she pay rent? How could she support Evan with his groceries? Just then, her phone buzzed. Megan initially ignored it, staring blankly at the windshield, her thoughts spiraling. Before glancing at the screen, it was an unknown number. She hesitated, and with a trembling hand, answered. Hello. A deep, familiar voice filled the line, steady and calm. Megan, this is Richard Lawson. Megan frowned. I'm sorry. Who? The man you served last night at Lancaster Grill. Her breath caught as she sat up straighter. Oh, yes, sir. How can I assist you? There was a brief silence before Richard spoke. I heard what happened. Megan's stomach knotted. Of course, news spread swiftly in a place like Lancaster Grill. Yeah. Well, she said, forcing a bitter laugh. Guess I should have just ignored you like everyone else. Richard's next words made her freeze. That's precisely why I'm calling. This wasn't the end of Megan's story. It was merely the beginning. With renewed tension in her grip on the phone, Megan felt bewildered. Why was Richard Lawson just another customer? Or so she believed, calling her the morning after her firing. Her heart raced as she sat up straighter in the driver's seat. I'm sorry. What do you mean? Richard paused before responding. I wasn't just there for dinner last night. Megan, he explained. I was there to observe how my employees treat people. Megan blinked. Your employees? I own Lancaster Grill. Richard clarified simply. For a moment, she was frozen in disbelief. Her breath caught between shock and confusion. I'm sorry. What? She finally stammered. You heard me, he repeated. Megan pressed her fingers against her temple. So, you're saying you own this place? Yes. And last night. You were what checking in? Richard said. I have a habit of visiting my restaurants without notice. No formal inspections. No heads up. I come in as just another customer. That's how you learn the truth about how a business operates. Her chest tightened. And what did you learn? She asked. Richard sighed. That I have significant issues with my staff. Megan snorted out a humorless laugh. Yeah, no kidding. Another silence ensued before Richard asked, How long have you worked there? Almost 3 years. She replied. 3 years, never missed a shift. Never late. I keep my head down, do my work, and treat people like human beings. Frustration crept into her voice as she added, but apparently that was enough to get me fired. That's exactly why I'm reaching out. Richard responded. Megan furrowed her brow, confused. I don't understand. Richard took a moment before continuing. I allowed them to fire you on purpose. Her stomach dropped. You what? I needed to understand their reaction. Richard explained. I wanted to determine if the issue stemmed purely from poor service or if it was something much deeper. Now, I have my answer. Megan shook her head. So, you let them dismiss me just for the sake of a lesson. I acknowledge it wasn't fair. Richard admitted. But now, I clearly know who I cannot trust to run my business as it should be. Megan felt her pulse quicken. And what does this mean for me? Richard's tone shifted, becoming firm, almost authoritative. It means I need someone I can trust. He said, I require someone who truly understands what it means to run a restaurant fairly. Someone who doesn't choose, who gets treated with dignity based on their biases. I still don't see what this has to do with me, Megan said. Richard's next statement brought her to a standstill. I want you to return, he declared, as the new manager. Megan's breath caught, her mind racing to absorb what she had just heard. What? You heard me, he assured her. I fired your manager this morning. Tom is out. Her mouth dropped open at the thought of Beth and Jason's impending shock. Richard continued, I realize this is sudden, but I'm not interested in anyone else taking over. You comprehend what is essential in a workplace. You understand how people ought to be treated. That's precisely what Lancaster Grill requires. Megan swallowed hard. I'm unsure if I can handle this. Yes, you can, Richard asserted. And you should. She stared out the windshield, her mind racing. Less than 24 hours ago, she had felt cast aside, and now she was being offered the very position of the person who had dismissed her. Taking a slow breath, Richard asked, What do you say? Megan hesitated, still hearing Beth's taunting voice, Jason's smug silence, and Tom's dismissive tone. They had presumed she was finished, believed they had cast her aside for good. But now, she had a chance to instigate the change they never anticipated. Lifting her chin, gripping the phone tighter, she declared, I'll do it. Richard exhaled a satisfied breath. Excellent, come in. Tomorrow morning. You start at 8. Megan nodded instinctively, even though he couldn't see her. I'll be there. After hanging up, she sat in stunned silence for a moment, gripping the wheel as the reality washed over her. Less than a day ago, she had left Lancaster Grill with nothing. Tomorrow, she would re-enter as the boss, and she wasn't going to play nice. Megan stood outside Lancaster Grill, clutching the strap of her bag. The morning air was biting, the kind that sliced through fabric. But she barely felt it. She had spent the entire night contemplating this moment. Yesterday, she had exited this building with nothing, no job, no explanation, no respect. Today, she was walking back in with the one thing Beth, Jason, and Tom had never anticipated: power. Taking a deep breath, squaring her shoulders, she pushed open the door. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. Just as always, customers dotted the booths, forks clinking against plates, a low murmur of conversation blending with the radio playing softly in the background. Initially, no one noticed her, but then Beth turned from the counter, saw her, and froze. Jason, who had been laughing with a busboy, abruptly fell silent as his eyes met hers. Confusion and unease flickered across his face. Megan allowed the moment to linger, just long enough for them to squirm, before confidently walking toward the counter and placing her bag down with intent. Beth broke the silence first, scoffing as she crossed her arms. What the hell are you doing here? Megan tilted her head. You'll find out soon enough. Beth's smirk faltered before she could reply. A door opened at the rear of the restaurant. Tom emerged from the office, already looking annoyed as he flipped through some papers. Beth, I need you to. Then he saw her, his body tensing as he glanced between Beth and Jason, trying to piece together the situation. Megan, he uttered slowly. You don't work here anymore. Megan smiled, though without warmth. Actually, I do. Tom blinked, astonished. What? Another voice interjected before she could answer. Richard Lawson stepped in, calm and composed as ever, with his hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored coat. He surveyed the room, taking a moment before locking eyes with Tom. Beth paled at the sight. Jason appeared as if he wished to vanish entirely. Tom's face turned a shocking shade of red. Wait a damn minute, no. Richard cut him off. I've heard enough from you. Tom clamped his mouth shut, and Megan almost felt a shred of sympathy, almost. Richard faced the rest of the staff. Some of you may be questioning what's unfolding. Let me make it clear. Last night, I visited this restaurant as a regular customer. He allowed the words to resonate within the confines of the establishment. What I observed was unacceptable. No one dared to say a word. Richard pointed at Megan. This woman was the only employee who treated me with respect, the only one doing her job as it ought to be done. He directed his gaze back to the staff, his expression becoming more severe. The rest of you, some ignored me entirely, while others made it apparent you had no intention of serving certain customers. His voice sharpened. That changes today. The air in the restaurant felt taut as he turned back to Megan. Megan is your new manager. Beth's mouth dropped. Jason's jaw clenched. The busboy standing by the kitchen appeared as if he were ready to applaud. Megan finally allowed herself a smile. Leaning against the counter, she turned toward Beth and Jason, still aghast. Leaning slightly closer. Well, she said lightly, this is awkward. Beth's expression soured. You. She turned to Richard, her voice sharper. You can't be serious. Richard replied, his tone unyielding. I am quite serious. If you don't like it, you're free to leave. Beth's jaw tightened. She wasn't naive. She understood that walking out would mean losing her paycheck. And she wasn't ready to do that. Jason, however, wasn't as astute. This is crap, he began before Richard cut him off. You're welcome to quit as well. Jason paused, his mouth opening and closing as if processing the implications in his mind. Beth shot daggers at Megan, who simply smiled back. Looks like we'll all have a lot of adjusting to do. Megan said, her tone bright yet resolute. So, let's get to work. She observed as Beth stormed toward the coffee machine, muttering under her breath, while Jason grabbed a rag, starting to clean a table with stiff, angry movements. Richard exchanged a knowing glance with Megan. I have a feeling you're going to do just fine here. Megan exhaled, witnessing the restaurant ease into a new reality, one where she had authority, for the first time in 3 years. Since stepping into this establishment, she felt something she had not experienced before, respect. The following weeks proved eventful. Megan anticipated resistance, welcoming it. Beth hardly spoke unless necessary. Her usual smirks replaced with tight-lipped silence. Jason sulked through every shift, openly demonstrating that he remained only because he had no better prospects. A few other servers, who had always complied with the previous culture of favoritism, gritted their teeth, but ultimately adjusted. Some didn't. A couple of employees quit during the first week, without giving notice, simply walking out when it became evident that the previous unwritten rules about who deserved quality service were over. Megan lost no sleep over it. She wasn't there to make friends. Her aim was to set things right. In her initial days as manager, she observed diligently, noting who actually put in the effort, who resisted change, and who merely needed encouragement in the right direction. Gradually, transformations began to occur. The kitchen staff, who had often kept quiet, began speaking up more, offering suggestions and highlighting unfairness. The younger servers, who had followed the lead of people like Beth and Jason, started watching Megan instead. One evening, a busboy named Noah, a college student working nights to fund his education, approached her while she cleaned the counter. You really got rid of Tom for that? He inquired, his voice cautious. Megan looked at him curiously. For what? For treating customers poorly. Noah continued. I mean, we all knew it happened, but I didn't think anyone actually cared. Setting the rag down, Megan met his gaze directly. I care. After a brief pause, Noah nodded. Good. Just like that. Things began to evolve. It wasn't instantaneous, but over time, the overall atmosphere of Lancaster Grill transformed. Customers noticed. Those who had been overlooked previously returned more often, smiling when they spotted Megan behind the counter. Regulars who had been quiet started opening up, chatting about their days, tipping more than before. Eventually, even the staff, initially skeptical, began aligning with her vision. Then one afternoon, Richard Lawson walked in. While Megan was balancing invoices, she heard his voice. "How's my investment performing?" Turning, she pushed aside the paperwork, adopting a smirk. "I think we're in good shape." Richard surveyed the restaurant, bustling not only with customers, but also exuding an entirely different energy than before. The staff operated with intent. The atmosphere felt lighter, and the tension that once engulfed it had lifted. "What did I tell you? You'd be fine," Richard remarked, leaning against the counter. Megan replied, "You didn't exactly offer me a choice." Richard chuckled. "No, I didn't." Megan sighed, glancing around. "It's funny," she admitted. "For the longest while, this job was merely a job, a paycheck. Now, it's something more." Richard's expression softened. "Funny how life unfolds, isn't it?" Megan reflected on that morning, sitting in her car, feeling she had lost everything. Yet here she was, not just another waitress anymore. She was the boss, and she was resolute in ensuring Lancaster Grill would never revert to its prior state, because doing the right thing wasn't always easy. Sometimes, it cost you everything, but at other times, it granted you far more than you could have ever envisioned. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because integrity matters, and it begins with how we treat one another.